Hello and welcome to the Darby Creek Diaries. I'm Gale Thompson and I'm so grateful that you stopped by my channel. Today we're going to do some stenciling techniques of various grades of easy to hard, and I hope you enjoy them. The first technique is super simple. It's just spray over a stencil. I'm taping this down, but you could use, I love the pixie spray too, and you just have a background dull ink blended and spray the shimmer mist, and it leaves a beautiful sheen on top, and that's all she does with it. And here is a card that I made with it. Now I'm not going to be able to do every card, or this video would take forever, but I wanted to show you that one. Then we have Heat Embossing One. I love this technique. Here is a pre-embossed stamped background that I am going to emboss over. And it's super simple to do. You do want to be careful when you heat it up because you don't want to really heat up the other very much. I ran my brayer over my VersaMark ink pad. I felt that was kind of the easiest way to get an even, nice layer of ink. I tried several ways, but this also seemed to help with the little nooks and crannies not going underneath. Now, as you can see, I've got the ink over the top, and I'm using broken china embossing glaze, and we'll get into that at some point as well. And it's going to go right over the white stamped background as a resist. And I just love this stencil. It's from Hero Arts. I'll have all the supplies listed below for you as usual. And by the way, while I'm doing this, please hit that subscribe button if you like what you're seeing. I really appreciate it. So now I am using my heat tool. I had it good and hot before I brought it to the card, and you do want to keep your gun moving because I don't want to melt that white stamped background into the paper. And so you're kind of just zipping around, hitting the high spots of the blue, trying to really stay away from overheating that white. And I can't leave well enough alone, so I go back and zap one little place. If it's glossy, it's done. If it's still matte, that means that you need to go back and reheat it. So I'm taking a little bit of Distress ink, and I'm just going to run over this background, and it'll make the stamped background just pop. And I just think this is a really fun technique. I love that background stamp. It's from Simon Says Stamp. I'll have it below as well. And I'm just running my brush over it, but it really wouldn't matter whatever you wanted to add the ink with. I just really wanted to get close up there so you could just see how all of that just pops. And then it just wipes away here in a second. Anything that's over the embossed part. So I'm taking just one of those cheap white towels, dry, and rubbing over it pretty briskly to get all the excess ink off, and see how that just pops. I just love this technique, and those embossing glazes are fabulous for that because they are translucent and not like a regular embossing powder, which is opaque and you wouldn't be able to see through it. Here is the finished card for that one. I like to just highlight the background. I don't want to, hide it. And here is another example of that I did for a blog named Hero Inspiration. And this technique is super simple because it's just taking the VersaMark ink that was already on the stencil and flipping it over and just rubbing it in with my brayer and basically using the stencil as a stamp. You've already done the work, so why not waste the ink? You'll just get a reverse image. So this is the reverse image of what the yellow and blue one was. Though there's no inked background behind that. This is just straight, I laid it on there. And there is the result. The next technique is just blending ink over a stencil, and that's, pretty much self-explanatory. I think that blending is a little more forgiving over a stencil. You do want to be careful, especially on a fine stencil like this, that you don't shove the ink underneath and ruin the effect. So sometimes you just kind of pounce. Then I jump over to the brush. I think the brush probably is a little bit better than the blending foam in this instance, although it takes a lot longer if you want a heavier layer of ink. And I'm just going to layer away here. I'm not even trying to do anything all that fancy because I don't claim to be a fancy blender, but this is pretty easy. And if it's an effect you need, then it's not that hard to achieve, and it just gets you a nice use out of your stencil. And here is the fun reveal. It's my favorite part. And if it would have been a thicker stencil, I would have sprayed it and laid it on another piece of paper. But in this instance, there wasn't enough ink on it to really do that. Then we are going to do a stencil over stencil. This is just basically doubling up your stencils. This is just a random old stencil I had. I don't know, probably got it at a Walmart or someplace like that. And I do take a little bit of the sticky off of the purple tape. I find that sometimes it does tear when it's fresh. And I'm just going to plunk on some Distress Oxide ink, and it doesn't matter how you do it. Just take your tool from the outside in so that you don't get underneath the edges, and it'll get you a nice clean line. And you don't really have to, like I said, do anything fancy because this is going to, a lot of it get covered up in a second. For best results, you start with your lightest color of ink unless you're using a pigment ink and can layer on top, but this is just the dye. And just tape your second stencil over the top of your first one without moving the first one. Now this is a delicate stencil, so you do have to be a little careful. And I do kind of a little more pouncing and just carefully coming in from the edges to get that cute little pattern. This is a Dare to Be Artsy stencil. I really like it. I can't think of the name of it at the moment, but it will also be listed at the bottom. And see, I'm just pouncing because it's so delicate. It would really ruin it if you got the ink underneath the lines. So here's the top part of the reveal. Isn't that gorgeous? And I think the sky's the limit. You could do as many stencils as you want, and see what a nice clean edge it has for the full reveal. I love it. And last but not least, we are going to do the baby wipe emboss. It was quite an adventure. I was having issues with getting the right pressure on my manual old Big Shot machine, so I decided to take it on over to the Gemini Junior, and well, it was interesting. I got too much pressure, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So right now I'm just plunking on ink. It's not really going where I want it to with the blending brush, so I think I'm just going to do direct to paper method and scrub it on there, but I don't want to mix up my inks too much. I know it doesn't make a difference, a lot of people say, but I don't like messy ink pads. So now I am going to use my blending tool and try to blend that in the middle a little bit. And it should come out orange, but I'm blending away, and then I'm like, well, we'll keep after this a little bit. But the technique uses enough moisture that it usually fixes itself. I'd had enough with the Big Shot. I couldn't use the embossing and because it was too thick to go through, and I couldn't use the die cutting. It was not putting enough pressure. So here we go to the Gemini. Now the Gemini, I should have read the directions, but hey, do as I say, not as I do. I just used my regular sandwich, pretty much. I laid the stencil over the top, And then I just placed half a baby wipe over the top of that. This was inspired by Jennifer McGuire, who does a lovely job, lovelier job than me, and I'm sure she didn't bleed out her poor Gemini Jr. So I get it out, and it does kind of wash out the paper a little bit, the ink on the paper. And this is watercolor stock, by the way, and it did wind up tearing. So I wasn't real happy with it. So I'm gonna pitch it and go to another one, but I did want to show you the results when you use too much pressure and I didn't tear it out carefully enough. So here's the new piece. Well, I really inked that puppy up, and I put on the baby wipe, ran it through the Gemini, and there was ink gushing out of every part of that poor Gemini. This is beautiful, but you cannot believe the mess I had. The Gemini literally was leaking red ink, but it seems to be working now. I mean, it was dripping down the side of my table. I could not get it cleaned up fast enough, but I think she's okay. She's just red on the inside. So I did finish the card up for you, and that's the card on the left, and I think it turned out beautifully. It just, now I know, I think, what to do to avoid that situation. And then here is another card that also was using that technique that had no incidences. So I think I may have it figured out. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you try these techniques and that you have a great day and that you'll come back and see me soon. And don't forget to subscribe. Bye-bye.